Hey, it's Robert Russell Designs. I'm going to show you how I made this beautiful dovetail trestle table with a center 36-inch extension. I always start by measuring the width of the boards, and then I go to either rough cut them to length or I rip them on the table saw. And in this case, we started with ripping them to length because the boards came in much larger than I wanted to handle on that table saw if I could avoid it. So I cross cut them on the Festool Capex miter saw, measure all of them to length, use this beautiful saw with wonderful dust collection from Harvey dust processor there. You just saw me rip one of them to its width, and then I am planing them here on the Jet 15-inch planer. This thing is a workhorse. Send all the boards through. After I do that, I start working on the trestle base here, gluing up lots of different boards on the trestle base, partly because of the thickness that the stock came in, and I wanted a whole lot of coloring and transition between each board as it shows up on the table. You'll notice that it's hickory, and hickory has a lot of character between the sapwood and the heartwood, and that is exactly what the customer wanted. So we said, let's go for it. Let's put a lot of character in it. Then I used the Festool Domino XL to cut for the loose tenor joinery that I use on each of the panels. I ended up making two different panels here, one main panel that I'll slice in the center a little bit later, and then one smaller panel that ends up being coffee table size because it's a giant center leaf, but it'll do the trick. So I'm hammering them in. This takes a little bit of care and effort. That's part of the reason why I use the loose tenon setting on the Domino XL. If I use the tight tenon setting on the Domino XL, that is just that much harder. I'm using my tiny little joiner to get a square edge, 190-degree angle. Then I throw it back in the jet planer to trim it up to the exact width that I need it. So I chop down the ends so I can get working on the open dovetails that'll end up being on the base of this table. So I mark them for measurements, get nice straight lines, use a Japanese pull saw. Then I bought this fancy bad axe saw that just wasn't big enough, but was absolutely quite amazing. And then I rocked the Festool oscillator to get a little cheat code because I ended up making these a little bit open for a little bit added interest. Now I'm cutting the opposite side of those dovetails on the table saw. This was a wee bit tricky, but it ended up accomplishing. If you saw the openness to this dovetail, I kind of liked the end design on it. It added a whole lot of extra features. Again, we're working on the trestle base here with the Domino XL, getting those loose tenons cut, getting some measurements here for the extension rails. And you're going to see when this thing is assembled that I've hidden those extension rails so you can't actually see them unless you open it up to put the center extension in. But I'm going to use some more Domino tenons to tighten up these ends of the trestle base. I broke out the Domino XL yet again. I think this is the fourth time for this table to work on the stretchers. Cutting the tenons. This time I used tight tenons to make sure those stretches are absolutely perfect and snug, which adds a little bit of difficulty to the install, to the assembly here. And you'll notice I am not the neatest when it comes to putting on glue. I do that because, well, I'm impatient and just want the thing to get clamped. And I broke out the Craig pocket hole jig. That is for the rail, the rails for the extension. That's pretty much the only time I use it these days. But I clamp the whole thing together. There's the trestle base. It is upside down, and it is time to sand. Sanding always takes forever, and it would be significantly more difficult and frustrating if I did not have that Festool RO geared sander. Dance through a bunch of different sanders for this table. Start with that RO, work on the ETS 5, go to the ETS 3, trimming up the edges here on the panel now. I always sand down the glue marks before I trim up the edges so that the Festool track saw sits nice and clear. This is the riskiest part of the build, cutting for that center extension. I get one chance to do this correctly Thank goodness this track saw is absolutely perfectly straight when I make that cut. Measuring for the rails for the extensions, always a bit of a risky part because kind of again have one shot to get this correctly. Found these great align and level table levelers. Rockler sells them. There's some other dealers like Osborne Wood Products that sell them. I actually buy them from Osborne because they end up being cheaper. But look at that smooth glide. More sanding on the base though this time. Sanding, I have a love-hate relationship to it. I love it because I'm able to think and process through projects and what's going on in my world. Hate it because it takes forever. Water popping, this is my favorite part of each and every build because it's the first time that I really get to see the true colors of the wood and safely store the old rags in the fire container. Mix up the Rubio monocoat here to crank it out and show the true beauty. Now getting this Rubio monocoat on there is a bit labor intensive. Every time I finish it, my hands, my forearms, my wrists are a little bit sore and worn out, but it is absolutely worth it. Getting it on the tabletop now, again, get to see the true beauty of the table, all the grain that this hickory likes to show, all the variety of colors. With the final wipe down and then the assembly for the table in all of its glory. Look at those open dovetail ends on the trestle base. And again, if you loved this video, if you liked it, if you didn't like it, please comment, give me some feedback so I can get better at what I'm doing here. But I wanted to show you this final product. Perfectly beautiful. Customer loved it, got back to me a month later, reiterated that he absolutely loved it. Really thankful for that. And again, don't forget, I put a large 36-inch extension in this table, and that is what I'm about to show you right here. How easy is that to open up and move? And time to drop in the 36-inch extension in the center. Now I decided to use the grain in the opposite direction, partly because we were playing with the grain on this table. We wanted to really shine and show up and say hello. And I really felt that putting the extension with the grain going the opposite direction would emphasize the beauty of the grain rather than trying to pretend like it's going to match on the other parts of the table. So one final flyby video here with the table fully extended to show the beauty of the grain on this hickory and those open dovetails on the trestle base. A whole bunch of added interest on it. Notice how I hid those rails as well with those caps on the ends. And just a couple of pictures here at the end while you hit that subscribe button, please.